This is the McKinsey podcast, where we help you make sense out of our world's toughest business challenges.
Welcome to the show. I'm Lucia Rahili.
And I'm Roberta Fasaro.
Middle managers, bogged down by process and administrative tasks, can get a bad rap. McKinsey talent experts Emily Field and Brian Hancock wrote the book Power to the Middle to polish the perception and clarify the vital role of middle managers. In the years since the book was published, in walked generative AI, and the way we work started to change. When I spoke with Emily and Brian on our McKinsey Talks Talent podcast, they said using Gen AI will free up middle managers to support their teams more effectively and might update their image while they're at it. Here's our conversation. Brian, Emily, welcome to the podcast.
It's great to be with you.
Great to be here.
So we are coming up on the 1-year anniversary of your book, Power to the Middle, Why Managers Hold the Keys to the Future of Work, co-authored with our former colleague, Bill Shaninger. Let's start with some context. Give us your best, quick and dirty on the book's fundamental premise.
In 2 words, managers matter, right? This idea that managers hold the key to the future of work, we believe that deeply.
And we just haven't set them up for success. When you ask managers what they're spending their time doing, over half of the time is in administrative or individual contributor work, things that aren't managerial. And when you look at who's the most burned out, what level of the organization most burned out, it's managers.
If you look at the evolution of the middle manager, they were once folks with stature in an organization, and they did seem to matter historically. They had purpose. What changed?
Being a manager has never been easy, but it has gotten more complex. Part of that just, from a history perspective, came from the rise of email and the ability for a CEO to rapidly communicate to all employees and managers saying, what does that mean for me? And so there was this question in the 90s of, what do we need middle managers for? There's a question now. And importantly, what we know is that managers are absolutely critical. They are the translation. They are the connectors. They are the navigators and the coaches. And also their role has become more complicated. And so managers were frustrated in the 60s and 70s. Managers are still frustrated now. 44% cite organizational bureaucracy as getting in the way of being able to do their work. And then you layer on the pandemic, the Great Resignation, quiet quitting, social injustice, well-being and burnout, generative AI and technology advancements, financial economic pressures. Wow, the manager is stuck in the middle of this meteor shower of external and internal forces that makes the job harder.
So let's stay on that AI point for a few minutes, because in the time that has elapsed since you published this book, Gen AI has really taken hold as a seismically disruptive force in the business world. And we have seen this relentless cost pressure on organizations and pressure on middle managers in particular. What do you expect this time out?
I think when it comes to generative AI, I think we're still in the very early stages.
Mm-hmm.
I think, we are starting to recognize the various use cases that generative AI can make. I was on recently with Stanford professor Eric Brynjolfsson, who does a lot of thinking about generative AI. And he thinks of generative AI as a general purpose technology, like the internet, like electricity. He said, and if you think about the early use cases of electricity, people are like, well, it's streetlights. We can have electric streetlights, and they're really expensive streetlights. And as you build more and more on top of it, you get more and more capability and pieces. And right now, we're a little bit at the analogous stage of generative AI. Lots of belief in the promise, some use cases that we're seeing really there. But in most organizations, it's not yet at a point where a manager's like, hey, I have freed up a full day a week. So I think what we're seeing our managers think through is, hey, there is a promise in the future but let's see how it plays out, because we've heard a lot, but we haven't necessarily seen the use cases. As Emily can talk through, what we are seeing our clients is really investing heavily in generative AI to help our managers.
So let me tell you the common frame that I hear from folks maybe in early days, which is really well-intended CEOs, business executives, CHROs saying, my managers are the most burnt out of everyone and they matter so much. And if we're being honest, we canceled some of our manager development programs during the pandemic because it was all hands on deck, need to deliver, safeguard. Also, it was unsafe to co-locate for a period of time. And so we are now going to focus on managers, and we're bringing back our first manager program. And because our managers are so burnt out, we're going to send them to a retreat for a week. And that is well intended, right? But the idea of sending managers away for a week to do leadership development when they are burnt out, when the work is not going to stop, when some of them are so stressed out that they're in the red zone, not the learning zone, right? Their cortisol's through the roof. This idea that we're going to send people away and develop them, frankly, is not the best use of resources. We need to think about developing managers is not just a learning program. Learning, training, development has a role, but it is a part of a broader manager operating system. And so first and foremost, when I'm talking to business leaders, my strong suggestion is before you send your managers to a leadership development program or a retreat, first create space. First create time in their day. What are they doing today that you can kill, automate, delegate down, streamline? Then once you've created some space in the system, how do you build some resiliency habits for your managers? How do you help them manage this inherent stress that we said is increasing with being a manager? How do we help them put on their own oxygen mask before they're able to help others, their teams? And then when you've freed up time and space and you've built resilient, adaptable leaders, then you can say, what is the leadership development program? And then perhaps the thing that is most important, but often forgotten by, again, well-intended business leaders that say, I've got to invest in my managers, is the key question every business leader needs to ask themselves, which is, what does my leadership team need to do differently to support our managers? If we say we want to empower managers, are we setting them up for success? Or if we're being honest, are we talking the talk but not walking the walk? And so leaders need to also change.
We see in the headlines again and again that middle managers are under pressure, are getting cut, particularly in tech organizations. Are you finding that within this particular pressured environment, clients are receptive to making the time for middle managers?
I think they are, because I think what they recognize is that it's not to say that there aren't efficiencies that can be gained at every level of an organization. If we streamline decision making, if we make accountabilities clearer, if we leverage technologies in new ways, it recreates the way work gets done at every level of the organization. And so I think what we're seeing our clients think through is, hey, let's think through holistically how work needs to get done differently. What's the role of the manager in the future? And then how do we craft that role in a way that provides them time to do what managers can do best? And in some organizations, that may be a reduction in the overall number of managers, but done in a way that actually frees up and creates more capacity for coaching, more capacity for the things that matter most. And so we don't see it as an either or conversation. We see it as a way of saying, hey, our organization isn't working. And the ways it's not working includes, it may not be in the cost position we need it. We may not have the coaching and development we have. Those things often go together. And so how do we comprehensively think about work? How do we think about management practices in the context of work, and how do we change it so that we're getting perhaps a more efficient organization, but also one that is more effective, particularly at the managerial layer.
Totally agree, Brian. And also, go back a year ago, right before the book came out, and there were some very prominent tech leaders questioning publicly, do we even need middle managers? And that's really great clickbait, right? But the reality is yes, we absolutely do. Managers are consistently on the top 3 list of many of the CEOs that I talk to. Now, what's really important too is, to Brian's point on business performance, is we also haven't set managers up for success. And then the other piece is that too many managers, not all, but many, are not set up for their best purpose. And so there are different types of managers. We often talk about managers as a, one common group, right? But there are managers that are player coaches. They have smaller spans of control, 3 to 5, and they have some individual contributor work that they are uniquely suited to do. Then you've got facilitators and coordinators that are able to lead more at scale. But in no situation that I described of these different types of managers, is there a situation where the right answer is one manager having one direct report. We often call those micro teams. And so this comes down to, particularly in a cost pressure environment, to Brian's point, saying, how do we set the organization up for success? How do you set the manager roles, of which there are multiple different flavors, up for success, and recognize that micro teams or onesie-twosie relationships are not the ones that are going to set the organization up to be able to deliver.
As we talk about the archetypes of managers, one of the things that heartened me most after the release of the book was the number of CEOs where what resonated was, yes, some of the white collar managers in headquarters, but they saw, when we're talking about power to the middle, they also saw their plant managers. They saw their store managers. They saw their facilities leaders. They saw people that were responsible for being the leader out in the field. And when you took all of this together, they were saying, yeah, our managers are saying, stop the emails coming from corporate. Stop the things that we're doing. Let me engage with our customers, our clients, our people. Let me figure out how to adapt what our offering is to the new things, because I'm the one positioned to make that happen. And they said all of the lessons of the book, we talk about lots of different types of managers, but they say it really comes to life for them in some of those distributed field management roles. And I thought that was pretty interesting. And if you add on to that some of the recent press, Walmart was recently in multiple different publications on their store managers. In addition to having dedicated a manager academy to lean in and coach the managers, it is now the case that a Walmart store manager can make over $500,000 a year.
Wow, really?
A Walmart store manager can make over $500,000 a year. They can make up to 200% of their base based on the performance. And when other organizations see that, they're like, okay, that is a real investment behind a pretty broad cohort of managers. And if Walmart can do it and do it at their scale, what does that mean for me?
How do you think the rise of AI will affect those spans and layers that you described in the knowledge worker setting?
I think managers will remain important. Managers are going to be the ones that they may be managing a team of people that they're apprenticing that are coming up. So managers will still need to be there. Managers will also need to kind of manage the underlying, tools. And if you want to think about, some of the assistants as, robotic team members, you might think of it that way. But managers are still going to be needed to integrate information, are still going to be needed to coach, still going to need to make things happen. So there may be some efficiencies if you take away some of the administrative work of managers, but I think you'll end up replacing that administrative work with managers with the coaching of team members, with the quality control, with the integration of pieces. Because generative AI, I think it's incredibly powerful that you can give a manager insight across all areas of the organization at their fingertips. And so what we need to do is we need to have more managers actually thinking through holistically and integrating. And we may need fewer managers that are managing an individual process or an outcome or a piece. Hey, they're the integrated problem solvers.
It's interesting. We recently published an interview as part of our At the Edge podcast series in which Reid Hoffman suggested that AI has the potential to develop soft skills, EQ and empathy. If that bears out, how do you see the rise of an EQ-equipped Gen AI affecting apprenticeship and coaching?
Wouldn't that be interesting, right? Like, if you think about it, we're saying managers don't have time to do everything that they need to do. And we need to free them up to spend more time coaching. If they could have, as to Brian's point on the manager co-pilot, someone, technology to share the load, I think that's a great thing.
And I think I would separate out two different things on the empathy and soft skill front. One is the ability to coach on it. And I think, we are seeing technologies that, would be able to look at the transcript of a meeting and provide coaching to somebody in terms of the tone of the meeting, the inclusiveness that they have, would be able to look at the patterns of their interactions on Slack or other collaboration tools and provide coaching and feedback. Generative AI could also help somebody coach through a mock feedback conversation. And so you can do that. So I think there are things where these tools can help somebody improve their soft skills. I think generative AI can, on the other side, we all want to be heard and seen. And if it's a bot on the other end, that may be fine for voicing your frustrations and getting through and like, okay, yeah, the bot's playing back to me, whatever. But you as an individual want to be heard and seen and know that you matter to an organization. And Gen AI is not going to be able to do that in and of itself. You need managers to make sure people know that they matter. And one of the interesting things is generative AI can help managers prompt them to hear and see their people. So it can remind somebody that their birthday's coming up, or an anniversary's coming up, a work anniversary's coming up, or that, it can prompt even the hardest manager, can prompt them with information that makes them more likely to present in a way that the people in their team feel seen and heard.
Brian, you invoked inclusiveness there. I'm just thinking about our signature report on women in the workplace, which we publish in conjunction with Lean In, and which is celebrating its 10th anniversary this fall. Last year, we saw again this phenomenon of the broken rung and the difficulty that women have in getting that first managerial promotion. Emily, talk to us about how diversity intersects with this middle manager research.
Yeah, and you mentioned this idea of the broken rung. The reality is that first promotion from entry level to manager is where we see fewer women getting promoted relative to men. Last year, for every 100 men that got promoted, 87 women got promoted. The numbers are disheartening, and then we need to dig into the why and the what do we do about it. On the why, what we know is that women are more likely to be promoted based on past performance. Men are more likely to be promoted based on future potential. So, Bob is a great guy. Bob's a rock star. I know he's going to do great at this. I know he's never managed before, but he's awesome. Versus, Mary. Well, I'm looking at Mary's track record and she's never managed anybody, so I don't know how she's going to do, right? Bob and Mary, fictional characters, but the reality is that when promotion and decisions are being made, this inherent bias creeps in. And because there are more men in those leadership levels, more men are making those promotion decisions. We need to debias the promotion process, and we need to make sure that we have a common framework, a common rubric on which we are assessing so that we weed out that bias and we promote through an equal process.
What has surprised you most in the response to this book over the past year?
I think what has surprised me about the response to the book is the degree to which it just continues to resonate with folks. I was expecting there to be a big launch, interest in the book, and then things kind of taper out. But people are continuing to find the book to say, this is holding up what I believe to be true, that managers matter, that we need to spend less time on bureaucracy and more time on coaching. We need to select people who are great at managing.
Yeah, and maybe to build on that, what's been most surprising to me is how relevant this topic is about managers. When we were writing the book, and I did a lot of writing on Delta flights cross country, in the margins of the book, right? It takes a while to write a book. So, I'm writing this 2021, 2022, and I'm writing in the margins, check for relevance for July 2023. Thinking to myself, some of the questions on flexible and remote work, on burnout and well-being, on the Great Resignation and quiet quitting, like, oh, surely we'll have figured it out. And by the time the book comes out, we're actually going to have to update it because it's not going to be relevant anymore. And the reality is that the book still resonates. Two other thoughts just in terms of what surprised me is the deep engagement of readers in the book and having conversations. I was recently with a group of 50 executives from a company, and it was their book club book. And they're talking about Rachel and Sonia, and like, wow, that's chapter 9. You went deep. And so just tons of really deep engagement. And then finally, what I'd say, and this was part of our intention in writing the book, to Brian's point of people wanting to be seen, people telling us, I see myself in those stories. I deeply, empathize with, those experiences. They are my own. And the way that the book has been a point of validation and a place to, a sort of launch pad to think through, reflect for managers. That's why we dedicated the book to them. And personally, I am thrilled that it's serving that purpose.
Amazing. What is your best advice to leaders as they continue to navigate various kinds of disruptions and change in thinking about the role of middle managers?
I would have 3 pieces of advice. 1, think about how you can create more time for our managers to spend on the most important activities, the coaching, the strategic activities. Secondly, how do we value managers for what they bring to the table? And I think that valuing managers includes defining what makes a good manager, selecting managers based on that, creating career paths that for people that want to go into management, great. But if somebody's a really good individual contributor, don't make them go into management. And then invest in our managers. Invest in the things that we know are going to be important for managers to do going forward. Invest in their development. Invest in the critical skills that managers are going to need to inspire and connect people to the mission and purpose, to help them in a new environment learn how to manage their teams in a way that's not micromanaging, but still empowering teams to do more than they thought possible.
Let me add 2. 1, as leaders, ask yourself, what do I need to do differently to support my managers? This is not just about managers showing up differently. This is about leaders enabling it and also being held accountable. And then to the point of diversity, equity, and inclusion, asking yourself, have I debiased my promotion process? Have I rooted out the inherent unconscious bias that exists? And have I created an environment in which people are being rewarded for and promoted because they are ready and great to be managers and not because of some, historical or outdated system of what is rewarded?
Brian and Emily, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks Thanks so much for listening to the McKinsey podcast. I'm Lucia Rahili.
And I'm Roberta Fasaro.
Find us on McKinsey.com. We'll have a transcript of this episode up shortly.
And download the McKinsey Insights app, where you can find this podcast and other helpful content updated daily.
If you enjoyed the show, we'd love for you to leave a rating and a review.
We'll see you in 2 weeks.